G'day ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Draw with Jazza. I'm Jazza and this video is a review of the Wacom Cintiq 27 QHD Touch. That's a lot of words. Now obviously anyone who watches my content knows that I am a big Wacom fan, so this video sort of comes with a little bit of bias, I guess you could say, but I'm going to be as honest as possible with all of my impressions regarding this device, and I'm going to give you as much information about the device that I found valuable and hope you will find valuable as possible. First things first, I did an unboxing video which you can check out by clicking the link on the screen and in the description where I opened the box. So if you like that sort of thing, feel free to check that out. But I'm going to jump straight into the review, starting off with some specifications that I found most appealing and interesting. This Cintiq device has a 27-inch display, which the name implies, in a widescreen 16:9 ratio with a maximum resolution of 2560 by 1440. The display has capacity to demonstrate over 1 billion displayable colors and supports 10-bit color. I'm going to be honest, I don't exactly know what that means, but it sounds fancy. The display boasts a 12 millisecond response rate, which is absolutely fantastic, and the touch unit supports multi-touch control. Now the device doesn't come with a stand in the way that the 24HD did, and we're going to touch on that in more detail later on in this video. Now beyond those very nice specifications, really what I suppose you want to hear about is what the device is like to have and use. So I'm going to begin with my first impression, and my first impression right off the bat was this thing looks sublime. It's incredibly well designed. It takes up the same size and footprint as the 24HD predecessor, and yet it's much more streamlined, very sleek looking, larger screen size. There are no bevels or distracting design features around the display itself. It's a very nice sheen through the entirety of the front surface. But as far as connecting and using the device went, my first impression was lackluster. Now, don't run away screaming. There are very good reasons for this, and I'm going to explain it. It felt like, for some weird reason, the display itself, the image I was getting was no better than what I had on the 24HD. If anything, it felt slightly fuzzy or blurry for some reason. It just wasn't as crisp as I was hoping for or expecting. Now, it turns out the answer to my silly problem was that I wasn't using DisplayPort. That also happens to be because the graphics card I had was over 6 years old and didn't have the capacity to host DisplayPort. So I was maxing out the resolution of my display at 1080p, and I was informed of this when I contacted Wacom technical support, and they very politely informed me that I'm an idiot. They are my words, not theirs. So with an upgrade to a better video card that has DisplayPort, I was able to have the full spectrum of colors and resolution on the QHD. And it turns out the Q in QHD stands for Quad HD. It's not just a fancy letter added to the start of HD. It actually means something technical. Now this was entirely my own fault because the website does specify that the full HD and the full range of colors is really going to get the best bang for its buck with DisplayPort. So, you know, if you're going to buy something, you should probably read it, which I obviously didn't do very well. If it so happens that you're running a really old graphics card and you want to get this tablet, you can get pretty inexpensive graphics cards that have DisplayPort that will give you everything in the device that you want from it. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Plus, the way I figured it, and the way you probably should too, if you have a 6-year-old plus graphics card, I think it's about time to upgrade anyway. Now, once I changed over the graphics card, the difference was immediate and very satisfying. Now, it doesn't sound like a huge difference, but there are a couple of things that really made it feel right. And one was the fact that the working area that I now had was huge. It was much better. Everything was much more compact in the toolbars, and in all of the applications I used, I had much more stage area. But beyond that, the fuzzy, blurry look that I had when I was running at 1080p was gone, and the image was crisp as Christmas. So to give you an idea of the difference between these two resolutions and how that changes the work area, this is a screenshot of Adobe Photoshop running at HD and Animate CC running at HD. And then after the graphics card install and blah, 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 this is then a screenshot of Photoshop running in QHD and Animate CC in QHD. And you can see that you get more area to work with in the stage, and obviously with it being a better resolution, you're going to have a much crisper image, and all of the tools are much more evenly and nicely spread out. So after my first impression, fixing the problem that I caused and receiving my secondary impression, the impression was then immersive and incredible. Now that being said, if you're an artist and you're, entering art, you can create amazing professional quality things with a Wacom Intuos Draw or Intuos Pro. But the real difference that having a device like the 27QHD makes is in two things: the speed and comfort of workflow and the immersion of the workflow. So you're producing the same quality work, but the way you work is sort of transformed into a much more enjoyable thing, which if you're anything like me and you sit at this thing for 8 to 12 hours a day sometimes, makes a huge difference to your quality of life. So now I'm going to touch on some of the other features on the 27QHD. The device comes with 4 USB 3 ports. Now previously, the 24HD had 2 USB 2 ports. It may sound like a slightly redundant feature to have, but the reality is these have been extremely useful. And I didn't realize this when I first got the 24HD, how useful 2 USB ports would be, but they were always used up. I never had any spare USB ports on my 24HD, and to have 4 ports on my 27QHD is a godsend. Even for something as simple as moving the receiver for a wireless mouse and keyboard onto the display so that it's merely 1 foot away from my mouse and keyboard for really seamless tracking can make a really big difference. And I like to use it to plug in peripherals that I use for something like editing. For example, I use a Razer Orb Weaver for my editing. And because my actual PC is a horrifying sight of daisy-chained USB 3 devices, it's really nice to have access to those extra USB 3 ports immediately in front of me that I can plug really simple things into, like SD card readers when I need them quickly without having to mess around with my very intricate, uninterruptible setup at the back of my computer. Now, of course, the 27QHD comes with a pen and a stand, and just as with the stands that come with other Wacom devices, it comes loaded with some spare nibs inside. These are the spare default nibs and also some variations. So there's some felt nibs and some other textures that you can get for the nib of the pen if you want a bit of a different or more naturalistic feel. Now, one of the most obvious changes between the 24HD and the 27QHD is this. Now, previously, the 24HD had express keys and rocker rings on the device itself, whereas now they've migrated it to this little nifty device. This is handy in a few ways. One is that obviously when there were express keys and rocker rings on the 24HD, they had it on both sides to cater for people who are left-handed and right-handed. Having these detachable and on a single device not only allows you to put it on the side of the tablet that is preferable to you, but also to move it at a vertical or horizontal position or even on top of the screen. And it's a bit magnetized too, so that within reason you can hold it and keep it on your display even if it's on an angle. The other reason I like this is because I don't use it. Now that may sound weird, but if there are express keys and rocker rings on the screen, with the amount of movement you have with your hands all over the device all day, every now and then you might make the occasional knock or do something accidentally on them. Having a device like this removes that problem entirely, because my personal preference is to put it in a drawer. Now, that's not to say there isn't great value in something like this, and I know a lot of people get a lot out of the express keys and rocker rings. I personally prefer a wireless keyboard simply because I use so many different programs that have so many keyboard shortcuts that it's not conducive to a rapid workflow for me to use a couple of shortcuts or even find some combinations that work on something like this. So for people who use it, it's an improvement, and for people who don't use it, it's still an improvement. Now, speaking of personal preferences, the next thing I want to touch on, is the touch feature, because I have the 27QHD Touch. Now this means that I can touch it and it will do things if I touch it with my hands. Now I'm going to be completely honest, once again, don't use it. Sorry. Now, there's nothing wrong with it, once again, especially if you're really used to using tablet-like devices and you like that connectivity of using your hands. I personally, once again, find it intrusive because I'm so hands-on so all the time, and even one or two occasional touches when I'm trying to use the pen, it's distracting and a little bit intrusive to my workflow. But funnily enough, they have the handy little feature to turn it off. So I personally keep the touch feature off, even though I have the touch device, but it's also something I may enjoy using at some point in the future, just not currently for the workflow and programs that I use daily. Now, in my personal opinion, the touch feature is most beneficial on tablet-like devices. So for example, I have a Wacom Cintiq companion and I use the touch feature as much as I use the drawing feature, and it's extremely useful, especially if you don't want to carry a mouse around with you or load up the pen and Smudge Guard setup and you're using it on an airplane and you're simply writing emails. But for something as robust and heavy duty as the 27QHD, which I use every day for all of my professional work at home in my office, the touch feature isn't something I personally use very much. But again, this is a relative thing and depends entirely on each individual's workflow. So it will be useful for some and not for others. Now, I mentioned briefly a pen and Smudge Guard workflow. That may sound confusing to people, and sometimes people comment on it. This is called a Smudge Guard. It's this funny little thing that people see me wear every now and then in my tutorial videos, and the Smudge Guard is something you can purchase separately from the Wacom shop, which basically acts to reduce friction so that when I'm drawing or scribbling on my Wacom Cintiq companion or 27QHD, I have the ability to do so without two things, any gripping or oil or anything unpleasant from my skin happening on the screen, and also to sort of reduce any heat interaction between the device and my hand. And now it's very minimal. There's very little sort of heat that builds up in the device or in the Cintiq companion, but if you're working for 8 hours, guarantee you by the end of that, there's going to be some warmth. So with this, it's completely unnoticeable. The last feature I want to talk about is the Ergo Stand. Now, I did mention previously in this video that the device doesn't come with a stand in the way that the 24HD came with a stand. Is this good? Is this bad? What's the deal? Basically, the 24HD as an entire unit was great, but also quite rigid in that you have that stand whether you wanted it or not. And there are some people who prefer to use arm mount stands or things that sort of have a bit of a different setup, and being forced to pay for the stand whether you used it or not was probably not something everyone appreciated. So it was some wisdom on Wacom's part to separate these two items. It allows people to get more bang for their buck and to have more personalized setups. Now, I had the 24HD and loved the stand, so it wasn't a question for me. When I got the Cintiq 27HD, I got the Ergo Stand. It feels honestly exactly the same as the 24HD stand, and this was one of those things where for me, it really benefited from staying exactly the same. So I'm happy with that. That being said, without the Ergo Stand, you can either mount it on a separate stand setup or use the default inbuilt legs that come on the device. These are two little prong things that slip out the back, they pull out, and it holds the device a few inches above the surface and keeps a little bit of an angle, maybe like a 18 degree angle from a horizontal surface. I'm not a huge fan of that low sort of angle, especially because I used to experience back problems when I used to hunch over my work for long periods of time, and this is something that I've learned not to do. So I definitely recommend finding a way to have a strong posture while you're working, and having the Cintiq Ergo Stand is something that has served that for me. The assembly of the stand is pretty easy. It seemed a bit confronting at first, I'll be honest, when I opened up the paperwork and had tried to look at how to put it together, but in reality it became pretty apparent that it was quite easy. It put together between 5 to 10 minutes of effort, and it really wasn't very difficult at all. And beyond that, it was really nice because it comes with new panels to allow for the mounting to be a seamless integration with the device and with the cables. So they're really all of my main thoughts when it comes to the Cintiq 27QHD device. I hope you've enjoyed my review. My final thoughts on it, wrapping it all up and just speaking from my heart, I've used this for a couple of months now, and beyond just using it at home in my office here, I also flew over to San Francisco and did some streaming with Adobe at the Adobe headquarters, and they had a Cintiq 27QHD that they opened then and there to use for the days of streaming that we had, and everyone loved it. Everyone who used it while streaming adapted to it very quickly. So it wasn't just my impression that was positive in a first impression sort of thing. These people had that experience as well. Now, it did only at that time work at 1080p for them as well. That's because we were running it all on HDMI cables into laptops. So again, you're going to find ways to optimize your workflow and the image you get from the tablet and device itself. But even if you're only working at 1080p on a laptop, which it has the capability to do and comes with all the adapters necessary to do that, it's still a really nice device to use. And then past that, when you get to the full spectrum of resolution and colors that the 27QHD offers, as all Cintiq Wacom devices that I've become acquainted with, it really offers the top level of the industry today. It is an amazing working experience, and as far as a professional who uses this every day, it's a delight. They're my final thoughts personally. As for who it's for, is it worth getting? Should I get this or something else? That comes down to personal preference and opinion and budget, because it's not a cheap device. That being said, it doesn't offer a cheap device's capabilities. It is a robust, sexy, hardcore piece of kit. So if you are a robust, sexy, hardcore artist, like me, so if you are a very serious working professional in a creative industry who uses their hands and interactive devices like this, I can't recommend it enough, especially if it's in your budget. So, final verdict in 7 words. I love 27QHD. Would recommend to pros. I hope you found this video informative or entertaining or irritating enough to watch all the way through. Thanks for joining, and until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I will see you later. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to my channel to see new content every week. Check out more of my stuff by clicking the annotations over there. If you want to support my work and get a few goodies for yourself, head over to my store for archives, ebooks, and get yourself something nice. That's it for now, and until next time, see you later.